Imagine a woman being so wicked that she poured hot water on a homeless girl she caught eating from her trash bin. This story is about the wickedness that a poor homeless orphan faced in the hands of those that she came across. It all began so many years ago in a very small house where a little girl named Ego lived with her poor father. His name was Unachuku, and he was a vulcanizer who did all he could to provide for his daughter and himself. Unachuku loved his daughter so much, and despite the fact that he was poor, he made sure that his daughter attended school like the other children. Unachuku worked hard to put food on their table and even took on menial jobs at construction sites to make ends meet. Ego, though just a little girl, understood the sacrifices her father made. She watched him come home every day exhausted and covered in dust from the construction site, his hands rough and blistered from fixing tires. Despite all the struggles, Unachuku always found a way to smile at Ego, telling her stories of hope, encouraging her to dream big, and reminding her that education was her way out of poverty. Ego's life, though simple, was filled with love and laughter. She loved school and tried her best to make her father proud. But as fate would have it, tragedy struck when Unachuku fell ill. What started as a fever soon worsened, and the money he had saved for Ego's future was quickly spent on doctors and medications. Ego stayed by her father's side, doing all she could to care for him, but no amount of care could save his life. Unachuku passed away, leaving Ego barely 10 years old all alone in the world. With no family to turn to, Ego was forced out of the small house they lived. She wandered the streets, searching for shelter and food, her once hopeful eyes now filled with fear and sorrow. The city was unforgiving to a child like her. She slept on cold pavements and begged for food, but more often than not, people turned her away, treating her like she was invisible. Hunger gnawed at her, and Ego moved from one place to the other begging. One fateful day, this was so many years later, Ego wandered into a wealthy neighborhood. Her eyes caught sight of a trash bin stationed outside a big house. Unable to resist the hunger any longer, she dug through the trash, hoping to find food to calm the pain in her stomach. Just as she found a piece of stale bread, the gates to the house swung open, and a woman, dressed in expensive clothes, stepped out. The woman's face twisted in disgust as she caught sight of Ego riffling through her trash. "What do you think you are doing, you filthy beggar? How dare you eat from my trash, you smelling pig?" Ego froze in shock as she dropped the bread and tried to explain, but the woman was not willing to listen to what she had to say. She walked up to Ego and used her heels to squash the bread to the floor, warning Ego never to eat from her trash again. "I don't want to see your filthy hands anywhere close to my bin again. Do you hear me?" she said to Ego, who stood there shaking in fear as she watched the woman catwalk back into her massive house. Just as the woman turned to walk back into her house, a voice said to her, "Ada, what do you think you are doing?" The woman froze in complete shock, her face unable to hide her anger as she turned to see her husband Chukuma standing at the door, arms crossed, having witnessed the entire scene. Chukuma, a man known for his fairness and compassion, stepped down from the doorway and approached the scene. His eyes were filled with dismay as he looked at the terrified girl and the piece of bread that his wife had wickedly trampled upon with her shoes. "How could you do that to a child?" Chukuma said to his wife, who could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Look at her. She's hungry and has no food to eat. She never came to disturb you for food, but the little food that she picked up from our trash, you decided to destroy it without providing her with a befitting food to eat, even when you have so much food lying around going to waste." Ada, still fuming in anger, stared at her husband and replied, saying that the girl was just another filthy beggar. "How dare she rummage through our trash I won't have her stealing from us, she said, her voice filled with intense anger. Her husband Chukuma could not believe what he was hearing. He ignored her protest and set his focus on Ego, who was still trembling in fear, unsure of what to expect. Are you hungry? He asked her with a calm voice as he looked into her fearful eyes. Ego nodded, too weak to speak, as tears silently rolled down her cheeks. Without hesitation, Chukuma reached out his hands to her. Come inside, let me give you some food, he said to Ego, who hesitated for a moment as she stared nervously at Ada, whose face was now laced with disgust. However, Chukuma's warm presence reassured her, and slowly she began to walk with him towards the house. Chukuma, I forbid you to bring her into our house, Ada shouted, her anger boiling over. She's dirty and probably carrying diseases. You're going to regret this, Chukuma, she said repeatedly, as Chukuma ignored her and took Ego into their home. Ada's face was now full of rage. You're choosing this beggar over your own wife? She said angrily, as she watched them walk into the house. Without another word, he led Ego into the house, guiding her gently to the dining room. He pulled out a chair for her and called for the housekeeper to bring food. Ego sat silently, her body tense, as she could not believe what was happening. She looked around the luxurious house, its grand chandeliers and polished floors, a stark contrast to the harsh streets that she had been living on for years. Within minutes, a plate of steaming food was placed in front of her. Ego stared right at it, unsure of whether she should touch it. Chukuma noticed her hesitation and smiled gently. Go ahead, eat as much as you want. No one here will hurt you, he said reassuringly. Ego picked up the fork with trembling hands and began to eat slowly. The warmth of the food filled her empty stomach, and for the first time in days, her stomach did not hurt. From the doorway, Ada watched, her eyes filled with fury. She could not believe what was happening. Her husband was feeding a street child in her home, defying her in front of a stranger. Chukuma received a call on his phone and briefly stepped out to make the call. Ada, seeing that he was no longer around the girl, stormed into the kitchen angrily to grab a jug of boiling water. Without thinking twice, she walked angrily to the dining table and emptied the boiling water on Ego's body. Ego screamed out at the top of her voice. The pain she felt in that moment was immense, and Chukuma, on hearing the scream, rushed out to see the horrific sight. Her clothes soaked in boiling water and her skin already blistered. Chukuma's heart sank, and for a moment, he stood frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend what his wife had just done. Ada stood there breathing heavily, her eyes wide with a mixture of fury and satisfaction. Chukuma snapped out of his shock and rushed to Ego's side. Oh my God, Ada, what have you done? He cried out, his voice filled with horror. He carefully pulled Ego away from the table, her body trembling as he clutched at her burns. The pain, almost too much to bear. Stay with me, Ego, stay with me, he whispered, his hands shaking as he tried to comfort her. Ada, still standing by the hallway, watched her husband tend to the poor girl, but her anger had not abated. She deserved it, Ada, still standing by the hallway, watched her husband tend to the poor girl, but her anger had not abated. She deserved it, Ada spat. I told you not to bring her into this house. Chukuma, I told you she was filthy. Chukuma turned to his wife, his face contorted with rage. Deserved it? He shouted. She's just a child, a hungry, helpless child, and you attacked her. What kind of a person are you, Ada? Ada crossed her arms, her lips curling in contempt. Don't pretend like you don't know what's best. That girl is nothing but trouble. She'll bring diseases into this house, and now you have to deal with the consequences. Chukuma could not believe the words coming out of his wife's mouth. You are a monster, Ada, he said through gritted teeth. I will never forgive you for this. In a panic, Chukuma grabbed his phone and called for an ambulance, his heart racing as Ego continued to cry out in pain. "Help is coming," he whispered to her, his voice shaking. "Just hold on a little longer." Ada stood in the corner, her face emotionless, as if she had already distanced herself from the situation. She didn't care about Ego's pain or her husband's anger. In her mind, she had done what needed to be done. The minutes felt like hours until the ambulance finally arrived. Paramedics rushed into the house and immediately attended to Ego, who was in excruciating pain. Chukuma watched, his heart breaking, as they gently placed her on a stretcher and began to treat her burns. Before they left, one of the paramedics turned to Chukuma. "These burns are severe," he said grimly. "She'll need to be hospitalized immediately." Chukuma nodded, barely able to speak. "I'll come with you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotions. As the ambulance door closed and sped away, Chukuma turned back to Ada, who was now pacing in the living room, her arms still folded across her chest. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said quietly, "but this is unforgivable. You need help, Ada. You are sick." Ada glared at him, her pride still intact. "You're the one who's weak, Chukuma. Taking in beggars and thinking you're some kind of savior. She doesn't belong here, and deep down, you know it too." Chukuma shook his head in disbelief. "No, Ada. The only thing I know is that your cruelty knows no bounds. I can't live with someone capable of such hatred." With that, Chukuma turned his back on his wife, grabbed his coat and rushed out of the door to the hospital. At the hospital, Ego was quickly admitted and doctors worked tirelessly to treat her burns. Chukuma stayed by her side, refusing to leave even when the nurses advised him to return home to get some sleep. He felt so guilty for putting her in such a condition and decided to do everything within his power to make her comfortable. Days passed and Ego's condition began to stabilize. The doctors, during their checks, found something shocking that they had to share with Chukuma. Ego was 2 months pregnant. Chukuma was shocked when the doctors broke the news to him. He sat in silence as he pondered on why life had to be so cruel to such a young and innocent girl. She had already endured more suffering than anyone her age should ever know. Homeless, abandoned, and now pregnant, with no one to care for her. Chukuma could not leave her alone at a time like this, considering the pain she was going through because of his heartless wife. So, he decided to take on the responsibility of Ego to ensure that she was well taken care of, especially in her current situation. However, Chukuma knew that his wife would never allow Ego to live in their home, so he made arrangements to get a home for her and a caretaker to look after her all through her pregnancy. Over the coming weeks, Chukuma began to make arrangements for Ego. He rented a small apartment for her, a safe haven, where she could heal and carry her pregnancy in peace. He then went on to hire a kind and experienced caretaker by name Mama Ijoma, who came highly recommended from the nurse who took care of Ego's bruises. Chukuma, on hearing all the good things she had done in the past, believed that Ego would be in good hands under her care. Not long afterwards, Ego was discharged from the hospital and Chukuma drove her to the new apartment. Ego, still weak and wrapped in bandages, remained quiet during the ride. She was overwhelmed, not just by the physical pain of her burns, but by the emotional weight of everything she had been through. She didn't know why Chukuma was helping her, but she felt immense gratitude towards him, knowing that no one had ever been this kind to her since her father died. Few minutes later, they arrived at the house and Ego could not believe that she now had a home. For years, she had slept on the streets with nowhere else to go. Ego replayed all the terrible memories in her mind, especially when she was defiled by a strange man who she never knew, a man who she was now pregnant for. The memory haunted her, but Ego was so grateful to finally have a roof over her head after years of being homeless. Chukuma helped her into the apartment, guiding her gently as she winced with every step. Mama Ijoma, who had been waiting for them, welcomed Ego with a warm smile. She immediately took over, helping Ego to settle in, offering her reassurance that she would be well taken care of. Back at home, however, Ada's anger had not dissipated. In fact, her resentment was growing as each day passed. So, she decided to discuss her concerns with her best friend Anwuli, who was known for being a gossip. Someone who delighted pleasure in stoking the flames of jealousy and mistrust amongst people. She often foiled Ada's worst instincts, and this time was no different. One afternoon, as Ada poured out her frustrations over lunch, Anwuli leaned in, her voice low and filled with conspiracy. Ada, I've been hearing things. She began, her eyes narrowing as she spoke. People are talking about your husband and that girl, and from what I have heard, she's even pregnant with child. Why does your husband have so much interest in her? Hope it is not what I am thinking, Anwuli said, as Ada frowned, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. What are you trying to say, Anwuli? Anwuli smirked and continued. Think about it. Why would he go to such lengths for her? Renting an apartment, hiring a caretaker, visiting her daily. He's suspicious. Are you sure he's not the father of the child, considering the fact that you haven't been able to have a child for him? Ada's heart pounded in her chest as Anwuli's words took root. The idea of her husband having an affair with Ego seemed preposterous at first, but the more she thought about it, the more her jealousy grew. Her husband Chukuma had been so protective of the girl, so willing to defy Ada's wishes for her. Could it be true? Could her husband be the father of the child? No, no, that can't be true. The girl is just 19 years of age, she said to herself as her heart began to pound in her chest. Thinking of what to do, her friend Anwuli did not stop there. Over the next few weeks, she kept feeding Ada small poisonous doses of suspicion. Every time they met, she would bring up Chukuma's visits to Ego, suggesting that his concern for her went beyond mere charity. She even began spreading rumors among their social circle, whispering to other women that Chukuma was keeping a mistress on the side who was now pregnant for him. Men don't just help girls like that for free, Anwuli said one afternoon, her voice dripping with venom. There's always something they want in return. Be careful, Ada, or you might find yourself replaced. Fueled by these thoughts, Ada's resentment turned into obsession. She began spying on Chukuma, keeping track of his every movement. She would secretly check his phone when he wasn't looking, trying to find proof of an affair. The more she searched, the angrier she became as she saw nothing suspicious. One day, Ada confronted Chukuma, her voice shaking with accusation. Why are you spending so much time with that girl? She said. What do you see in her? Do you think I don't know what's going on? Chukuma, taken aback by her sudden outburst, could hardly believe what he was hearing. What are you talking about, Ada? She's just a child in need of help. That's all. There's nothing more to it. But Ada was not convinced. Nothing more to it? Then why all the secrecy? Why are you going out of your way for her? You've never done anything like this for anyone else. It's obvious what's happening. Chukuma sighed, his patience wearing thin. I'm doing what any decent person would do, Ada. She was homeless and suffering because of you. I couldn't just leave her on the streets. Ada's eyes flashed with fury. Because of me? Don't you dare blame this on me. You brought this into our lives, and now everyone's talking about you too. Chukuma shook his head, frustrated and hurt by her lack of compassion. I don't care what people are saying. This isn't about you or your pride. This is about helping someone in need. But Ada, consumed by the lies Anwuli had planted in her head, refused to listen. So, she decided to pay Ego a visit to teach her the lesson of her life. When she arrived at Ego's house, Ego was so terrified to see her. Before she knew what was happening, Ada pounced on her and began to beat her up. Ego screamed out in terror as she pleaded for her dear life. Ada, still full of rage, continued to beat Ego up, not caring that she was pregnant. After several minutes of intense beating, Mama Ijoma returned and caught Ada beating Ego. "Stop it, leave her alone," she yelled as she pushed Ada away from Ego, who was unconscious at this point. Ada, seeing what she had done, fled the scene and ran for her dear life. Chukuma was on his way home when he received a call from Mama Ijoma informing him of the brutal attack on Ego. His heart sank once again. Fear gripped him as he rushed to Ego's apartment, praying that she survives. When he arrived, he found Ego lying on the floor, unconscious, bruised and battered, with blood stained on the floor, and Mama Ijoma, teary-eyed, was doing everything she could to revive her. Chukuma's heart shattered at the sight of this. His wife had gone too far. Without hesitation, he lifted Ego into his arms and rushed her to the hospital. Ego's condition was critical. The doctors informed Chukuma that the brutal attack had not only endangered her life, but that she had lost the pregnancy. Chukuma was so devastated. He sat in the waiting room, filled with guilt and sorrow, realizing that he had not acted quickly enough to stop his wife's madness. Chukuma decided that this was the final straw. Ada had to face the consequences of her wickedness. She had attacked an innocent girl, a pregnant child, and nearly cost her life. He needed to teach her a lesson that she would never forget, one that would make her realize the severity of her actions. Chukuma, in that moment, returned home with some hefty-looking men and moved his wife out of his mansion. "I don't want to ever see you again," he said to Ada, who called him all sorts of names and accused him of sleeping with an underage girl. "You are not ashamed of yourself. See the dirty thing you are choosing over me, a girl that is not even worthy to clean my shoes. I am so disappointed in you, Chukuma. I thought you had class, but now I see how classless you are," Ada continued to say, as the hefty men pushed her out of the house and locked the gate. Ada could not believe her eyes. Her pride made it so difficult to beg, as she made up her mind to deal with her husband Chukuma for what he had done. "I will make you pay," she said, as she called up a cab and headed straight to her friend's house. When they arrived at Wuli's house, Ada tried to pay for her cab fare and realized that her transactions were declining. She used several accounts, but all the transactions declined. Ada's heart pounded in panic as she tried one card after another, all of them being declined. She couldn't understand what was happening. The driver, growing impatient, looked at her suspiciously. "Madam, if you no get money, tell me," he said in frustration. Feeling humiliated, Ada scrambled through her purse for whatever cash she could find, managing to pull out just enough to pay the fare. As she stepped out of the cab, her heart raced with anxiety. She thought to herself, "Chukuma must have frozen all my accounts." Determined to find solace in her friend Anwuli, she knocked on the door, expecting the usual warm reception. But when Anwuli answered, the expression on her face was anything but welcoming. She barely let Ada inside before crossing her arms and speaking coldly. "Ada, I've heard everything. You've lost your mind. Chukuma has kicked you out and you're causing all kinds of problems. You can't stay here," Anwuli said bluntly. Ada's face fell in shock. "What? Anwuli, I thought we are friends. You said you would always stand by me," she cried out, her voice breaking with desperation. Anwuli shook her head, not an ounce of sympathy in her tone. "That was before you became a liability, Ada. Do you know what people are saying? Chukuma is one of the most respected men in this city, and you attacked a pregnant girl. My reputation can't survive this scandal if you stay here." Tears welled up in Ada's eyes, but Anwuli's face remained stone cold. "Please, Anwuli, I don't have anywhere else to go. Just let me stay for a few days. I'll sort everything out." But Anwuli's reply was final. "No, Ada, I can't get mixed up in this. You've burned too many bridges. Now you're on your own." With that, Anwuli shut the door, leaving Ada standing alone, rejected by the only friend she thought she could trust. The reality of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. She had nowhere to go. Desperate, Ada banged on the doors, crying and begging for Amuli to let her in, but Amuli ignored all her cries. Panic surged through her. She was stranded in the middle of the city, with no access to money, no friends to turn to, and no one to help. She was utterly alone. Her only option was to return to her family in the village, the same family she had abandoned and ignored for years after marrying into wealth. The thought of returning in disgrace filled her with dread, but with nowhere else to turn, she swallowed her pride and called a cheap local taxi to take her to the village. The journey felt like a lifetime. Memories of her childhood, of the humble home she had once shared with her struggling parents, flashed through her mind. She had left that life behind so many years ago, promising herself she would never go back. Now, she was returning in shame, with nothing but her regrets. When the taxi finally pulled up to her family's old worn-down home, Ada hesitated before stepping out. Her once beautiful clothes were now wrinkled, and Ada did not look like the sophisticated woman that she had once been. She stood outside the house for a moment, gathering the courage to knock on the door. Her mother answered, her eyes widened in surprise. "Ada, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mixture of shock and concern. Ada, now overcome with emotion, broke down in tears. "Mama, I have nowhere else to go," she sobbed. "Chukuma has kicked me out. I don't know what to do." Her mother, though hurt by the years of neglect, took pity on her daughter. "You always thought you were too good for this place, Ada. Now you're back. After all these years," her mother said, a mix of sadness and disappointment in her voice. Ada collapsed into her chair, her tears falling freely as she cried. "I was wrong, Mama. I was so wrong. I let pride and anger destroy everything. I have hurt everyone and I feel so stupid." Her mother sighed deeply, looking at her daughter with weary eyes. "Life has a way of teaching us hard lessons, Ada. You are given everything, but you let pride ruin it all for you. All this while, I expected you to understand the plight of the poor and be more compassionate towards them, considering how poor we are. But once you went into wealth, you cut us off and never looked back." Ada looked up at her mother, her face filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mama. I thought money and status were everything. I didn't care about anyone but myself. Chukuma is right. I'm a monster. I've hurt people who I believe could not do anything for me. How can I undo the damage that I've caused?" She asked her mother, who advised her that the key is humility. "From today henceforth, my daughter, see others as though they are better than you, as only then would you truly live a humble life. It will take time, but the first step is to let go of that pride." Ada, still overwhelmed by guilt, nodded slowly. "I want to change, Mama, I truly do. I just don't know where to begin." Her mother offered a sad smile. "Begin by taking responsibility for your actions. You can't escape the consequences, Ada, but you can learn from them, and you can use what's left of your life to do some good." In the days that followed, Ada remained in the village stripped of her wealth, pride, and status. The whispers of the villagers were difficult to endure, as many still remembered how she shunned them when she was wealthy. But now, Ada had no choice but to rely on the people she had once ignored. She began to help her mother fry akara in the village. The people mocked and laughed at her, as they could not believe what Ada had been reduced to. Months passed, and Ada did all she could to contact her husband Chukuma, who blocked her number and refused to respond to any of her mails. She even borrowed money from her mother to travel to the city to plead for his forgiveness, but the security at the gate refused her entry, saying that his boss instructed him never to allow her on the premises. Ada stood at the gate pleading as tears poured down her face, but the guards remained firm in their resolve, refusing to let her in. The shame and humiliation she felt in that moment was overwhelming. She could not believe how far she had fallen from a woman of wealth and status to someone begging at the gate of the home she once ruled. Rejected, Ada had no choice but to return to the village. The journey back was long and painful, filled with memories of all the opportunities she had wasted. She remembered the people she had looked down upon, the same villagers who were now her only companions. Back in the village, Ada threw herself into helping her mother. She woke up early every day to assist with frying akara, cleaning the house, and going to the market. The work was hard, and the ridicule from the villagers never ceased. They mocked her at every chance, calling her the fallen queen, but Ada endured it all in silence. She had no one else to turn to, and no more illusions about who she had been. One afternoon, as Ada was serving akara by the roadside, she saw a young girl, dressed in rags, walking slowly by. The girl's appearance reminded her so much of Ego, the girl she had once poured boiling water on in a fit of rage. Ada's heart clenched with guilt. She watched the girl for a moment, noticing how she hesitated as she neared the akara stand, her eyes wide with hunger. Without a word, Ada picked up a plate of akara and handed it to the girl. The girl looked up surprised, but took the food gratefully. "Thank you, ma," she whispered before walking away happily. It was in that small act of kindness that Ada realized she could start making amends. She might never be able to undo the harm she had caused, but she could at least try to help others now in the way that she should have helped Ego that day. One afternoon, as she sat by the roadside frying akara, her best friend Anwuli parked close by and walked down to her. Anwuli could not believe how low Ada had fallen. She laughed and mocked her, revealing that her husband Chukuma was set to wed Ego. "I heard the gist a few days ago and decided to come let you know that the poor girl has finally stolen your husband." Ada's heart pounded as she listened to Anwuli's mocking words. The idea that Chukuma would marry Ego, the girl she had once hurt so cruelly, felt like the final blow to her already shattered pride. Anwuli's laughter echoed in her ears, but Ada could not respond. Her mouth went dry, and she stared at the ground, trying to process the shock. "Well, I guess you're getting what you deserve," Anwuli sneered, turning to walk away. "Good luck with your akara business, Ada." As Anwuli left, Ada felt a deep sadness settle in her heart. She could not escape the guilt that now consumed her. Ego, the very girl she had treated with such cruelty, was about to become the new wife of her husband. Ada's thoughts raced as she remembered all the pain she had caused, and she knew that she had no right to ask for anything from Ego or Chukuma. But her mother's words about humility rang in her ears. Ada decided that she needed to make things right. That very evening, she went to her mother, who was sitting outside their very small house, peeling vegetables. Ada knelt before her mother, her heart heavy with guilt and shame. "Mama, I have to go and ask Ego for forgiveness," Ada said quietly. "I don't know if she will ever forgive me for what I did, but I have to try. I can't live with myself, knowing that I hurt someone so deeply and never tried to make it right." Her mother looked up, her face filled with compassion. "It's a hard thing, my daughter, but if you truly want to seek forgiveness, you must go with a heart of repentance. Only then will you find peace, no matter what happens." The next morning, Ada gathered the little money she had saved from frying akara and traveled to the city. The journey felt long and agonizing as she replayed the horrible things she had done to Ego in her mind. By the time she arrived at Ego's apartment, her hands were trembling. She stood at the door, taking a deep breath, and then knocked. After a moment, the door opened, and there stood Ego, her face showing signs of surprise and fear. She was no longer the fragile, homeless girl Ada had tormented, but she still carried the scars from that painful encounter. "Ada," Ego whispered, her voice shaky, "what are you doing here?" Ada immediately fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Ego, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I did terrible things to you." things I regret every day. I was blinded by my pride, and I hurt you in ways that no one should ever be hurt. I've lost everything, and I know that's because of my own actions. But I beg you from the bottom of my heart, please find it within you to forgive me. Ego stood there, silent, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. She had suffered so much at Ada's hands, and the pain of that day still haunted her. But as she looked at Ada kneeling and weeping before her, she saw not the proud woman who had once hurt her, but a broken soul seeking redemption. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ego's voice broke the silence. I don't know if I can forget what you did to me, she said softly, but I see that you've changed, and I believe you are truly sorry. It will take time, but I'll try to forgive you. Ada, overwhelmed by relief, sobbed harder. Thank you, Ego. I don't deserve your kindness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the pain I caused you. Just then, the door behind them opened wider, and Chukuma stepped into the room. Ada's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the rumors of him marrying Ego, and seeing him here now made everything feel so real. But before she could say anything, Chukuma spoke. Ada, he began, his voice calm but firm. There is no wedding. There never was. I knew you had changed, but I needed to be sure. I wanted to see if you would truly seek forgiveness, not just from me, but from the one who you wronged the most, Ego. Ada looked up confused. But Anwuli said you both are getting married. Chukuma smiled as he revealed to her that he purposely allowed the rumor to spread, knowing that it will eventually reach you. I wanted to see if truly you had changed, and now seeing you here, I'm convinced that you have truly changed. I had to take everything from you to remind you of what life truly is about. All the while, I had my eyes on you, and it hurt me to see you suffering, but I knew that this was the only way that you could truly learn and change. Ada, I forgive you. You are my wife, and I want you to come back home. But you must promise to be different, to be kinder and more compassionate. Ada looked up at Chukuma in disbelief. Tears continued to stream down her face as she realized the magnitude of what he was offering. Another chance, after everything she had done. I promise, Ada whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. I will change, Chukuma. I'll be a better person, not just for you, but for everyone I've wronged. I don't want to be that cruel, selfish woman anymore. Ego, who had been standing quietly throughout the exchange, stepped forward. We all have our moments of weakness, Ada, but it takes real strength to admit that we are wrong and to seek forgiveness. I'm willing to let go of the past, and I hope you can find peace within yourself. Ada, for the first time in a very long time, felt a sense of hope. She had lost so much, but in that moment, she realized that true wealth didn't come from money or status. It came from the love and compassion we show to others, from the humility to admit our mistakes, and from the courage to change. The lesson to be learned from this story is that pride comes before the fall. Ada had to lose everything to realize that humility and kindness are far more valuable than wealth and status. Always be compassionate towards others and be sensitive to their plight. Never mock a pain you have never suffered, and be kind to people that you come across in life. Be wary of friends who fuel negativity and envy in your heart, like Anwuli did to Ada. These so-called friends can lead you down a path of destruction by encouraging your worst instincts rather than helping you grow and improve. Another important lesson is the power of forgiveness. Both Chukuma and Ego were willing to forgive Ada despite the pain she had caused, and this shows that true strength lies in the ability to forgive and allow others the chance to change. Ego, who had every reason to hold on to resentment, chose the higher path of letting go of her anger, opening the door for Ada to redeem herself. Finally, the story teaches that personal growth often comes through humility. Ada's journey from pride and cruelty to humility and redemption underscores the importance of learning from mistakes, seeking forgiveness, and being willing to change. True character is built not on wealth or status, but on kindness, compassion, and the willingness to admit when you are wrong and work to make things right. I hope you enjoyed